Let me ask you something. What if I told you that the highest court in the United States, 9 justices appointed for life, supposedly immune to political pressure, just told the President of the United States, no, you don't have that power. And then, within 24 hours, that same president looked the Supreme Court dead in the eye and essentially said, watch me. That's not a hypothetical. That happened. This week. Right now. Today. And the reason nobody in your life is talking about it the way it deserves to be talked about is because most people, even smart, engaged, politically aware people, don't actually understand how tariff law works, what emergency powers are, or what it means when the three branches of the U.S. government start openly colliding with each other like tectonic plates. But you're about to, right now, in plain English. Before we go any further, if nobody in your life is breaking this stuff down for you in a way that actually makes sense, that's exactly why this channel exists. Hit subscribe right now so you never miss what they don't want you to know. This is Senate Decoded, and we're just getting started. Okay, let's build this from the ground up because the details matter here. This isn't just political noise. This is a constitutional moment, and it's going to shape the next decade of American trade policy, economic strategy, and the balance of power between the White House and every other institution in Washington. Here's the timeline. For months, well over a year, really, the Trump administration has been using a law called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, to justify sweeping tariffs on goods coming into the United States from countries all over the world. We're talking tariffs that hit dozens of nations, tariffs that rattled global markets, tariffs that generated headlines in Tokyo, Brussels, Beijing, and London. The legal argument from the White House was essentially this: the United States faces a national economic emergency. Foreign nations have been exploiting us in trade for decades. That emergency gives the president the authority under IEPA to act unilaterally and decisively. No waiting for Congress, no lengthy legislative debate, just action. Now, whether you agree with that policy or not, that's the argument. And for a while, it held. The courts were slow to act. The tariffs stayed in place. The administration kept pushing. Then, on February 20th, 2026, everything changed. The Supreme Court of the United States, in a 6-3 decision, said no. The president does not have the authority to levy these sweeping tariffs under IEPA. The Emergency Powers Law does not cover this. This is a power that belongs to Congress, and the president overstepped, 6-3. That's not close. That's not a swing vote deciding it. That's a clear majority of the highest court in the land, drawing a very bright line around presidential authority. And within hours, President Trump took to Truth Social and called the ruling, and I'm quoting here, ridiculous, poorly written, and extraordinarily anti-American. He didn't just criticize it. He announced he was going around it. That same day, Friday the 20th, he signed an executive order imposing a new 10% global tariff, this time under a different legal authority, Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. And then, on Saturday morning, he raised it again to 15%. 15% on everything, from everyone. So here's the real question, and this is what we're going to spend the next 20 minutes unpacking together. Who actually has the power here? What does the Constitution say? What does the law say? And what does this mean for you? To understand this story, you've got to understand the three-legged stool that is the American government. And I know, civics class, you've heard this. But stay with me, because the way these three legs are interacting right now is genuinely extraordinary. The executive branch, led by the president, is supposed to execute the laws passed by Congress. The president also has certain specific powers: commander-in-chief, veto authority, executive orders within defined limits. In the area of trade, the president has historically been given significant latitude. But here's the key word: latitude given. Given by Congress, given by law, not inherent, not unlimited. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution is crystal clear. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises. Tariffs are duties. Congress owns tariffs, full stop. Now, over the decades, Congress has delegated a lot of that authority to the president through various laws: the Trade Act of 1974, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, and others. But delegation is not the same as permanent transfer. Congress can give authority, and courts can determine whether a president has exceeded the authority that was given. The courts exist to interpret the law, to be the referee when the executive and legislative branches disagree, or when either of them appears to have stepped outside the lines the Constitution draws. The Supreme Court, in this ruling, essentially said EPA was never designed to give the president this kind of blanket tariff authority. The law was meant for targeted, specific responses to genuine foreign threats, not a sweeping economic overhaul of global trade relationships. Now, here's where it gets fascinating. The president's move, going back immediately with a new tariff under a different legal basis, isn't necessarily unconstitutional on its face. Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974 does give the president some authority to impose temporary tariffs. There are limits. It's designed for balance of payments emergencies. It has caps. It has congressional oversight requirements, but it's a real law with real authority attached to it. So Trump's message to the court is essentially, you took one tool away from me, fine. I have other tools. And that's where this becomes a constitutional chess match unlike anything we've seen in a very long time. Let's talk about IPA, because this law is going to keep coming up, and most Americans have never heard of it until this week. The International Emergency Economic Powers Act was passed in 1977. Its purpose was to give the president tools to respond to unusual and extraordinary threats to national security, foreign policy, or the economy, threats that originate substantially outside the United States. Think freezing the assets of a terrorist organization. Think blocking financial transactions that fund hostile foreign governments. Think targeted sanctions. The law requires the president to declare a national emergency, consult with Congress, and report regularly on actions taken. It was designed as a scalpel, a precise instrument for specific threats. What the Trump administration did was use it as a sledgehammer. The argument was that decades of trade imbalances, currency manipulation by foreign governments, and structural disadvantages in trade agreements constituted a national emergency, and that IPA therefore justified broad, universal tariffs on all goods from all nations. Legal scholars were divided. Some argued the text of IPA was broad enough to support this reading. Others argued it clearly was not. The courts began working through those arguments. The Supreme Court this week sided with the latter interpretation. The majority said, in essence, this law does not grant the kind of sweeping tariff authority the administration claimed. To find that authority here, you would have to distort the plain meaning of the statute. The 6-3 split is also significant. This is a court with a conservative supermajority, 3 Trump-appointed justices among them. The fact that the ruling went this way, with this margin, signals that this wasn't a close call for the majority. This wasn't a 5-4 opinion where one vote goes the other way and everything changes. This was a decisive ruling, and the president, who appointed 3 of those justices and clearly expected a different outcome, called it deeply disappointing and said he was ashamed of certain members of the court. That statement alone deserves a moment of attention. A sitting president expressing shame about Supreme Court justices is not normal. It is not ordinary political frustration. It is a signal of just how much the administration believed this authority was theirs, and how jarring it is to have the court say unambiguously that it isn't. So, the administration pivots. And here's what's smart about the pivot, and here's what's risky about it. Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974 allows the president to impose a surcharge of up to 15% on all imported goods when the United States is experiencing a serious balance of payments deficit. There are conditions. The surcharge is supposed to be temporary, 150 days without congressional approval, though Congress can extend it. There are reporting requirements. There's oversight baked in. But here's the thing. It is legitimate authority. It is a real statutory power. And by moving immediately to use it, first at 10%, then raising it to 15% within 24 hours of the Supreme Court ruling, the Trump administration is doing 2 things simultaneously. First, it's showing the court and the country that it doesn't need IEPA to apply tariffs. The policy continues. The direction doesn't change. The administration is signaling we are going to find legal ground to stand on, and we will keep moving. Second, it's forcing Congress to react, because Section 122 has congressional oversight built in. So now the question becomes, what does Congress do? Do they act to extend the surcharge beyond 150 days? Do they push back? Do they pass new legislation to either authorize or curtail the president's tariff authority? This is, whether you love it or hate it, actually a sophisticated legal and political strategy. It keeps pressure on trading partners, maintains the economic leverage the administration wants, and shifts the battlefield from the courts to Congress, where the president arguably has more allies. The risk? Section 122 has never been used at this scale before. It's an obscure provision of a 50-year-old law that was designed for a very different era of global trade. Legal challenges will come. And if the Supreme Court looks at Section 122 used the same way it looked at IEPA, skeptically, searching for congressional intent and statutory limits, the administration could find itself back in the same position it's in right now. The chess match continues. Okay, enough legal theory. Let's talk about what this actually means for real people. For you, a 15% global tariff is not a small thing. This is not a minor policy adjustment. This is the United States telling every country on the planet, if you want to sell goods to American consumers, you're paying 15% on top of whatever other tariffs already apply. Think about what goes through your mind the next time you're in a store. Electronics, cars, clothing, food products, furniture, appliances. The supply chains that deliver virtually everything you buy run through multiple countries before a product reaches your hands. A 15% surcharge at the border is a cost that gets passed somewhere, And often, that somewhere is you, the consumer. Now, supporters of this policy will say, and this is a legitimate argument worth taking seriously, that short-term price increases are worth the long-term goal of rebuilding American manufacturing, correcting trade imbalances, and forcing other nations to the negotiating table. They'll argue that for decades, American workers have absorbed the hidden cost of unfair trade practices by foreign governments, and that tariffs are simply making that cost visible and redirectable. Critics will say, also with legitimate arguments, that tariffs are taxes, that the burden falls disproportionately on working-class Americans who buy more imported goods as a percentage of their income, and that retaliatory tariffs from other countries will hurt American exporters, farmers, manufacturers, tech companies who depend on global markets. Both of those arguments are real. Both have evidence. The truth is, the full economic effect of these policies won't be known for years. What we do know right now is this. Markets are watching, trading partners are calculating, foreign governments are deciding whether to negotiate, retaliate, or wait. And the 15% number didn't come from an economic formula. It came from a president responding to a Supreme Court ruling within 24 hours. That's not how trade policy normally gets made. And the speed and improvisation of it, whatever your political views, introduces uncertainty. And markets, businesses, and foreign governments hate uncertainty more than they hate any specific policy. Here's what I want you to walk away understanding above everything else. This week's events are not really about tariffs. They're not even really about trade. They're about a question that has defined American constitutional history from the beginning. Where does presidential power end? Every president tests the edges. Some push harder than others. But what's happening right now, a president using emergency powers laws to conduct sweeping economic policy, a Supreme Court pushing back hard, and the administration immediately pivoting to new legal authority to continue the same policy. This is a stress test of the constitutional system at a scale we rarely see. The founders designed the separation of powers specifically to prevent any one branch from accumulating too much authority. But they also knew, and this is the uncomfortable truth that constitutional scholars wrestle with constantly, that the text of the Constitution is sometimes ambiguous, that laws passed by Congress sometimes delegate authority in ways that weren't fully anticipated, and that in a crisis, real or perceived, the pressure to act and to act fast is enormous. What IEPA shows us is that laws passed in one era can be stretched by future administrations in ways the original drafters never imagined. What this Supreme Court ruling shows us is that the judiciary still has the will and the votes to say, no, this far and no further. What the administration's response shows us is that presidential power is remarkably resilient, that a president with a clear agenda and a legal team willing to dig through 50-year-old statutes can often find a path forward even when one door closes. None of this is going to be resolved quickly. The Section 122 tariffs will be challenged in court. Those challenges will work their way up. The Supreme Court may weigh in again. Congress may act or fail to act, which is its own form of action. Trading partners will react. Negotiations will happen. Some tariffs will stay. Others may fall. But the constitutional question, how much power does the president have to reshape the American economy by executive action alone? That question is now front and center in a way it hasn't been in a generation. And the answer the courts give over the next months and years will define the limits of presidential authority for decades to come. You might be wondering, where's Congress in all of this? Great question. Because here's the quiet, uncomfortable truth that doesn't fit neatly into either political party's preferred narrative. Congress gave away a lot of its trade power. Voluntarily, over decades, the Constitution gives Congress the power to regulate trade and lay tariffs. But Congress, over the course of the 20th century, passed law after law, delegating huge amounts of that authority to the executive branch. IEPA was one. Section 232, which allows tariffs on national security grounds. Section 301, which allows tariffs in response to unfair trade practices. Section 122, which we've just been discussing. In each case, Congress decided, for various reasons, some practical, some political, that it was easier to give the president flexibility than to write trade law through the slow, messy, compromise-heavy legislative process. So now, when people look at a president using these delegated powers in ways Congress didn't anticipate, the honest response has to include, Congress built this. Congress holds the authority to take it back. Congress could pass legislation tomorrow clarifying exactly what IEPA covers, exactly what Section 122 covers, exactly what presidential tariff authority looks like. It won't, and here's why. Legislating on trade is politically brutal. Every district has industries that benefit from some tariffs and industries that are hurt by others. Every senator has farmers who want open markets and manufacturers who want protection. Trade policy requires trade-offs, and trade-offs require political courage, and political courage is in extremely short supply on Capitol Hill in the current environment. Beyond that, in a moment of divided government or partisan polarization, passing comprehensive trade legislation requires bipartisan cooperation. And bipartisan cooperation is functionally non existent right now on any issue of this magnitude. So Congress watches. It criticizes from the sidelines. Individual members give floor speeches, committees hold hearings, but the votes needed to fundamentally reset the legal framework of presidential trade authority, they're not there. They've never been there. And until they are, presidents will keep finding the edges of these delegated powers, and the courts will keep being asked to draw the lines. Let's zoom out for a second, because this isn't just a domestic constitutional story, it's a global story. America's trading partners have been watching this drama play out. The tariffs under IEPA, the legal challenges, the Supreme Court ruling, the pivot to Section 122, the jump to 15%, and they're doing what governments always do. They're calculating. Some countries will retaliate. They'll impose their own tariffs on American exports. Agricultural products are always a target because they're politically painful for American farm states, and the math is easy for foreign governments. Europe has done this before. China has done this before. If 15% tariffs stay in place for any significant period of time, retaliation is almost certain. Some countries will negotiate. The Trump administration has consistently argued that tariffs are a pressure tool designed to bring trading partners to the table and force better deals. There's historical precedent for this working. The renegotiation of NAFTA into the USMCA, for example, involved tariff threats that helped accelerate agreement. Whether that logic holds at this scale against this many countries simultaneously is an open question. Some countries will simply route around it. Supply chains are more flexible than people think. Goods that currently travel directly from country A to the United States can be rerouted through country B, processed or repackaged, and re-exported. The tariff doesn't go away. It just creates incentives for creative logistics. Governments and companies have been doing this for as long as tariffs have existed. What's different about this moment, and this is worth underscoring, is the speed of the policy changes. A 10% tariff Friday evening, a 15% tariff Saturday morning. That kind of rapid escalation makes it very hard for trading partners to respond rationally, for businesses to plan, for supply chains to adjust. The uncertainty itself becomes the economic event. All right, let's bring this home. Here's what actually matters from everything we've covered today. 1. The Supreme Court just said clearly and loudly that there are limits to what a president can do by executive action in the area of trade and economic policy. That's a significant check. In an era when executive power has been expanding for decades under administrations of both parties, this ruling is a meaningful boundary. 2. That boundary is not absolute. The administration found an alternative legal pathway within hours. The courts will evaluate that pathway too, but the fact that it exists means the policy continues while the legal battles play out. In the real world, with real tariffs affecting real prices on real goods, the legal timeline matters enormously. 3. Congress is the missing player. The institution that the Constitution designed to own trade policy has largely stepped aside through its own legislative choices, through political dysfunction, through a decades-long habit of delegating hard decisions to the executive. Until Congress reasserts itself with actual legislation, this cycle will continue. President pushes, court pushes back, president finds another path. 4. The economic consequences are unfolding right now. A 15% global tariff is not a theoretical policy debate. It is a real cost entering the economy. How large, how lasting, how distributed across consumers, businesses, and trading partners that we'll learn over the coming months. But it is happening. And 5, the one I want to leave you with. This is a constitutional moment. Whatever you think about tariffs, about trade policy, about this particular president, what you are watching is the American system of government doing exactly what it was designed to do. Different branches checking each other, laws being tested, power being contested, courts making consequential decisions, administrations pushing back. It's messy, it's loud, it's uncomfortable, but it is the system working imperfectly, as it always has, to prevent any one person or institution from accumulating unchecked power. The founders would not be surprised by this story. They designed it specifically to produce exactly this kind of friction. So here's where I leave you today. The tariff war isn't over. The legal battles are just beginning. The economic effects are just starting to land. And Washington is going to keep moving fast. Faster than most media outlets can or will explain to you clearly. That's what Senate Decoded exists for. Not to tell you what to think, not to push you toward a conclusion, but to give you the tools and the legal background, the historical context, the plain language explanation, so that when you hear IEPA or Section 122 or emergency tariffs or executive authority, you're not lost. You're not dependent on a pundit to tell you the spin. You understand it yourself. Because here's the truth. An informed citizenry is the only thing that actually holds this system accountable. Not the courts, not Congress, not the press. You, citizens who understand what's happening and why it matters, are the final check. So if this video gave you something, If you walked away understanding something you didn't understand an hour ago, do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, share this video with one person in your life who you think deserves to actually understand what's going on in their government. And leave me a comment. I want to know, do you think the president has too much power over trade policy? Should Congress take it back? Do the tariffs make sense to you economically? The conversation is the point. This channel exists for the conversation. I'm Senate Decoded, and I will see you in the next one.